Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Needens, one of the social workers here at KU Alzheimer's Disease Center. And we're going to have a conversation today about including children in our conversations about dementia. Some of you may be wondering, how do we tell grandchildren? How do we tell perhaps neighbor children that we're close to, or others that are active and important in our lives? And so today we're going to have a dialogue about what do we consider, how do we do that, what's the importance of doing that. I have had individuals tell me sometimes that they didn't think the kids were affected. In fact, I remember one time going into a junior high classroom. I had been invited by a family member to present on Alzheimer's disease. And the teacher, basically said, I don't think anybody's, facing that, but you're welcome to come in. And one of the first questions I asked was, how many of you have had a neighbor or family member that have Alzheimer's disease or a memory problem? And almost half the classroom raised their hand. So kids are involved, and they know, they recognize, they may not talk about it. But they certainly serve lots of roles. Sometimes they're direct caregivers. Some of you may have loved ones with the disease that was diagnosed younger. And so you maybe have kids at home. I certainly know families where we have kids that play a role in terms of direct caregiving, staying with mom or dad while the other parent runs errands or works. Or watches or tries to monitor while the other parent cooks dinner, etc., does chores. So it is not uncommon for children to be in the role of direct caregiver at times. They provide respite. I know of families who bring over grandchildren to stay with their loved ones so that the grandpa or grandma can do something else while the kid is visiting, which is beautiful. So sometimes they are there to provide some respite. They certainly, in the case of grandparents, can have parental time and energy diverted to those with the disease, and may have feelings about that their time gets divided or less, or is focused on the person with the disease. They may witness a range of emotions in parents about the situation, parents that are upset, stressed, overwhelmed, any of those sad, any of those kinds of things. They may experience reduction in time spent with grandparents or other family members that they're used to spending time with because of the disease. Forced and poorly understood alterations to the relationships with the disease, that they're not understanding, why have things changed? Why don't we talk the way we used to? Why don't we visit the way we used to? Why does someone get upset? Those kind of questions, which may or may not be vocalized, but exist. And then if the person that's living with the disease lives in the home, so if it's a parent or if it's a multi-generational household, maybe they're less comfortable with bringing people over. Or maybe they have to only bring people over at certain times, but there's impact even in their social life at times. All kids react differently to these situations, just like all of us react differently when a cognitive disorder is diagnosed. But there are factors that we need to pay attention to, some of which impact quite significantly. So first is the nature of the relationship prior to the disease onset. Did they live in town? Were they down the street? Did they visit on a regular basis? Is it a grandchild with a particularly special relationship with the person? Where the person lives makes a difference. Are they seeing the changes on a day-to-day basis, which actually sometimes is easier, kind of toe in the water, at least they see it, rather than visiting and being shocked by perhaps the change. So where the person lives. makes a difference. How other family members are coping with grief issues, including last on this list about how open it is, or is the disease being discussed? Is the diagnosis being discussed? People are people of a personality and in a culture where they're sharing their emotions? I'm sad about it sometimes, but I see these, positive things that it's not what we want, but so really looking at how do they cope, and additional stressors in the household. Dementia seldom is the only problem on the table for families. Are there other family conflicts? Are there other family members that are ill, medical issues, financial issues, conflicts? What are the other stressors in the household? How many are they? The significance of those. The presence of mood or behavioral issues. So, in the ideal world, we would be integrating kids in the conversation as soon as the diagnosis is made early on, so they can grow into whatever changes as the path continues. But if they're not being engaged until middle stage and they begin to see agitation, anger, depression, anxiety, and that makes a difference on the child's response. And if they haven't been prepared for that, they're seeing it, it comes up acutely, and they're seeing it in unprepared moments. It can raise the bar in terms of their fear level. And whether the person with the disease acknowledges it and is open about it, I certainly tell those living with the disease that they have a significance and power in assisting the family in adjusting to these early changes. But it could be that your loved one is not at a point of being open, or maybe they're middle stage and they just really don't see it can't be open in that way. All of those things impact the child's response. We can see the impact on children in various ways. We can see them not wanting to visit the person, or being hesitant about the person, or even talking negatively about the person. We can see fear. They're avoiding being alone with the person, or limiting their conversation with them. We can also see the flip side, that there's a sense of excessive responsibilities. I've got to help. I've got to do this. And trying to sometimes I have seen kids who were just really decimated by some experience of trying to help that was rejected. Anger and impatience, and I'm talking about on the part of the child, that they can be angry with the person living with the disease, or impatient with them, scolding them, etc. We can see that impact. We all know as caregivers that there are times that we get frustrated and say things we wish we didn't say, or react in a way we wish we hadn't reacted. Children certainly have that. And because they're at a point developmentally where they don't have complete control, in terms of the filter between thought and action, those kind of feelings might come out quicker than for an adult with a stronger filter. Fears about what's going to happen, asking parents questions perhaps about their own health, or trying to just being more needy with parents, sticking to them more closely with parents. All of these things may say something about their fear of their parent, losing their parents, or their own safety. And then seeing sadness. They can act like the person's already gone, talk about them in that way. We can see acting out behavior, including an impact in schoolwork, especially if we're talking about a parent with the disease. Blaming self for adverse reactions, just that, over-functioning child, and they can withdraw And of course, we get concerned about the level of depression there. Now, kids can be complicated. I mean, kids are complicated. And we've got to take into consideration a number of things when we're sharing information, when we're having these conversations. And it isn't always easy, and there are some inherent challenges in it. Some of that is just developmentally with pre-adolescents and adolescents. We can see that they will resist any support or information that we know that they need. I'm doing fine. I don't need to talk about it, that kind of thing, even though there are those pieces that they need. And then it's a struggle sometimes to find a balance. How much do I say? Life is far more than just the cognitive disorder. We don't want to make every interaction about the person living with the disease, their diagnosis. We want them to have a continued relationship with the person living with the disease on all the levels that they did before. We want them to have a relationship with you, whether it be as another parent or another grandparent or friend, outside of a conversation with a cognitive disorder. So we don't want to overwhelm them, in other words, with just focusing on, gosh, grandpa, has this. So it's a balance between giving information, but not focusing life on the dementia at all times to the detriment of those other elements. Often kids want to protect their parents at the expense of meeting their own needs. So for those of you who have children at home and your spouse has the disease, they're going to protect you. They're going to protect you as much as you protect them. And so we have to consider that as we open the environment to having conversations not hidden. And sometimes that means even accessing outside interventionists. And then we pay attention to developmental differences. So not just what age they are, but emotionally, where are they at? Developmentally, where are they at? What's their world right now? There are some myths and snags that stop us from successfully integrating children in our conversation. Sometimes there are those who think kids are not impacted because they don't show emotion. Oh, they act the same, they're doing the same. Well, they may be coping completely fine, and they may not, but that's the fact that they choose to show emotion is not always the indicator, especially if it's a family in which they're trying to protect all of you. There's a belief that hiding your emotions help children. That's not true. Kids can read us. Our emotions are never fully hidden. And it's also the case that children need to know that you can have all kinds of emotions and still be okay, that there's appropriate and healthy ways to show your emotion. It is okay to be sad at times. That's healthy. It doesn't mean something is wrong, or that security is completely decimated. You need to show them you can be sad and still be okay. You can be angry and still be okay. You can be uncertain and still be okay. But you have to be able to be honest about those emotions before we can teach the children that those kind of facts exist. Sometimes people feel guilty. I'm so sad my children, my grandchildren, whoever have to see and be exposed to this experience. Well, the most resilient people out there are folks who have had to deal with challenges in their life. The most fragile people in this world are those that never had to face tough moments. So life is one in which we need to help the children cope with tough situations. It isn't a negative. If it's handled right, it can be a positive. Sometimes we lose awareness of our own level of stress and depression. And that can certainly translate in ineffective ways to to talk to kids about this and to integrate kids, and they could begin then to worry about you. That's not just the person with the disease, it's also you. So we've got to be in tune with our own level of stress and depression and be working on it. And seeing no option but to trade the child's needs for the needs of the person with the disease. In other words, especially if you're in the sandwich generation, that you just see no choice. You know, when a parent is going through a tough time with this disease, you have to go, and the child's needs get set aside. Perhaps there's some scale of priority, and what happens is you end up feeling guilty on both ends. And there are options, there are ways to balance that. They're not perfect ways, but there are ways, and nobody should get left behind in this. Not you, not the person diagnosed, not any family member, including the children involved. So let me tell you, absolutely key number one is open conversations. And they should include an educational aspect, and it has to be age appropriate. It has to include kind of what to expect. And I'm not talking about a lecture about the disease entire and here's what's going to happen, but grandpa has something wrong in his brain. He has a disease, he has a sickness, and here's what it might look like. It might look like getting your name mixed up. It might look like forgetting your birthday party. It might mean that he gets stressed or anxious in large groups. It might mean that he's quieter. It might mean that when you ask him to read the book, he might have trouble with it, whatever it is. But to talk to the child about kind of what to expect and why, what's happening. Part of the brain isn't working. Like a light bulb isn't working. You want to connect it to something that they can understand, and connect it to biology, connect it to a disease, that it's not him, it's not her. She loves you. She wouldn't want this. It's nothing to do with you or with that person. Because they get cranky or say something inappropriate, that's not them, that's the disease. That's what the disease is making their brain do. So you want to coach them on communication elements. Talk slower sometimes, that it's harder in groups. Wait till grandpa's alone, that it may be a time limit. Whatever the communication needs of your particular loved one with the disease. If it's someone in early stage and they're open about it, to say it's okay to ask grandpa what he thinks, what he thinks about it, what he feels about it. So whatever those communication elements appropriate should be included. You want to talk about it in small bits, not long bits, not lots of information. Allow them to kind of take it in, and you give them another bit of information at another time. Anticipate that they have questions. And if you think that there's certain questions, answer them before they even get asked, but leave the door open for those questions, and make sure they understand the difference between feelings and cognition. Even when grandpa doesn't remember that you visited, you make him feel so good, and that good feeling lasts. That's why it's important to go. So separate the feelings and cognition. Normalize, let them know it's okay to be sad when they see changes, or to be angry, or to be afraid, that those are normal emotions, and you just talk about them. Acknowledge common challenges. I know you, when you visit, you're not sure exactly what to say when he says something. So here's how you can answer him. So acknowledge some of it. Or if he doesn't know what to do, here's what you can do. So, because a lot of, I think, fears come about because kids don't know how to respond. Heck, a lot of visitors sometimes, especially when people are in middle stage or beyond, they're not sure how to react. So any visit goes better when they're prepared and armed with, if this comes up, here's how you react. And kids are not different. So if there's common challenges that you see in your loved one, share that with your child and help them prepare for how they're going to respond to that. Use books and films. There's a lot of good ones out there. We can certainly share some of the names of some of those books. If you want to holler at it, give us a call and ask us. Some of my favorites are Georgia Music by Helen Griffith, and Wilford Gordon Partridge McKenzie by Mem Fox. But there are a number of really wonderful children's books. They often don't say the word Alzheimer's. They're often not those kind of educational children's books that really kids don't necessarily connect to. I look for books with the messages of relating to people and the messages of something positive and beautiful illustrations, things that connect with kids, and affirm their contribution in supporting the person. And you don't expect them to understand or feel okay with it all the time. So thanks for helping. Thanks for visiting. I know it wasn't hard to go, but you know what? You made Grandpa so happy, those kind of things. And it's okay, you know, that it was tough for you and that it's not your favorite thing to do. I get it. So those kind of conversations, normalize. Listen and observe. Don't react to the negative statements. Don't dismiss it. Don't invalidate it. I hate going to see Grandpa. You don't say, oh, that's a horrible thing to say. Say, talk about that, son. And if they're not ready to talk about it, say, I understand. It's not easy. Things are different. But I'll tell you what's meaningful, and maybe we can figure out a way so it's not so terrible for you. But to let them talk. Don't invalidate how they feel. If they don't want to go see the person, I wouldn't force them to go. I would explore how that might be okay, whether it might be, at a restaurant, or whether it might be taking an activity to do together, whether it might be with another cousin. There might be ways to tackle so that the feeling of dread is not attached to those visits. And I think the more we prepare kids, the less that will be. But I wouldn't force kids that feel traumatized or struggling with going. They can write letters to send that could be read. Hey, Grandpa, I was thinking about this memory. So they can be alive and well in the person's life, even if they're not willing to visit as much as you would like them to. Always respond to indicators. Sometimes it's statements, sometimes it's actions, sometimes it's just your inherent insight about that child. But if you get a sense that worry, fear, anger, any of that is on board, you want to acknowledge it and you want to reassure we're all going to be okay. We're dealing with this as a family. Here's the things that we're doing. I love you. They love you. It's that constant acknowledgement and reassurance that makes a difference. Provide opportunities for the child to protect their feelings in safe ways. And sometimes that's connecting through books. And by that, I mean, in Wilford Gordon, which is about a little boy that visits his friend next door in the nursing home that has memory problems, rather than talking about how your child is feeling, to say, how do you think Wilford Gordon feels about that? How do you think Miss Nancy feels? Do you think Miss Nancy enjoyed those visits? What do you think made that visit work? And so you're really talking, you're having a conversation that's meaningful with the child, but you're allowing that safe projection on the characters in the book so that they feel comfortable talking. And you can do that with movies, you can do that with stories, you can have them paint pictures or paint with you, or talk about some of their artwork, etc., but pay attention to those projective opportunities. Support expression of feelings, share some of your feelings in tolerable doses and age-appropriate ways. So to say, you know, I get sad sometimes. I'm so happy to be with you, but I'm a little sad about grandma. And, you know, I just need to be sad for a while and then I'll be okay. You know, she makes me happy too at times, but, you know, I wish she didn't have this. And, you know, I just want to help her. So whatever those small doses, but to expose some of your sadness or feelings will help them, as long as you're also following up with the reassurance. Encourage the letter writing, journal writing, story creation, especially as we get to teenagers. Include a balance with lighter moments. It's okay to laugh at things. There's a lot of things in this disease that are laughable. And there are many people that, you know, I have worked with, that I have loved, that have had this disease, and certainly that they're able to laugh at themselves and some of what happens. Caregivers who are able to laugh at the situations sometimes that come up. It's necessary. It's stress relief, and kids need that too. So balance it with lighter moments, with fun. Always remind them they're loved, and discuss the ways you cope. When I'm sad, I do this. You know, that, you know, I feel, you know, that it's okay that I'm sad sometimes, but here's how, you know, sometimes I just need to go work out in my yard for a little while. That helps me deal with it and I feel better. Or, you know, maybe you and I go take a long walk and I'll feel, so discuss the ways that you cope. So, you know, I talk about it, talking about it helps me, or whatever, because then that teaches them that there are ways to cope, that we don't have to feel ashamed when we feel bad. That's not weakness when we feel bad. We just cope with it. It's just part of life. Reduce the sense of uncertainty in the interaction. Visit the best when it's the best time for the person. So, you know, if you're visiting parents, if kids are visiting grandparents, it's not, we'll come over at Saturday at 1. It's asking mom, what's the best time for dad? Maybe it's 10 in the morning, and maybe it's just for half an hour. I mean, but work that out. What's the best times for them? The direct caregiver, the primary caregiver, is going to love you coming over most any time, but it may be that you need to work with that primary caregiver on the best time for the person with the disease. Limit the number of people involved in the visit. So at family get-togethers and all the grandkids are there, that may not be the best time, the best interaction that the person living with the disease has with their grandchildren. So connect on a one-to-one basis. You know, have those, even if they're shorter time frames, one-to-one. And I think it often works best if there's kind of activities to do together. You know, work on, you know, weeding the garden, or cooking together, or sorting pictures together, or whatever it is. But think about activities that can be successful, where the child and the person living with the disease can be involved. Be knowledgeable and address the mood and behavioral symptoms in the person with the disease, so that we're not putting kids in a situation where there's volatility, and especially as it relates to depression in this population. And if you've listened to some of these mindful minutes, you know that depression is significant in this disease for many people, and can present in terms of agitation and negativity. And it may be appropriate to deal with the depression and remit some of that depression before grandchildren visit. or at certain times in certain doses. So pay attention, treat those mood and behavioral symptoms so that the person living with the disease can really enjoy the visits. Don't leave a child in the position of direct care if behavioral or mood instability has been present in proximity. We don't want to put a child in a situation that they're uncertain how to manage and that can be dangerous. Remind the child that they're not responsible for the reactions in the person living with the disease, that their feelings sometimes can be mixed up because of this sickness going on in their brain. So that they're not responsible, but talk through those communication and interaction options, what those options are, if they're at an age appropriate to do so. So if grandpa says something wrong, don't tell grandpa he's wrong. If he calls you by another name, that's okay. He loves you. He's got the name mixed up. Don't mention. Whatever your situation is, whatever, it depends on the stage of the person living with the disease, and it depends on the child, but we need to, again, prepare them for those communication strategies. Connect and remind of the educational elements, and sometimes it's even looking at educational clips about what's going on in the brain, that there's brain cells that are dying. There are, YouTube videos that depict some of that process for children, what's going on in the brain. So you could explore those and integrate those and connect and remind them of that, that's just part of the brain that isn't working quite right. And I think it's important to remind that research is being done to find answers, because those kids are afraid, at times can be afraid of not only what's going on with grandpa, but what's going on with mom and dad, and are they going to get this, and am I going to get this? So remind that research is being done to find answers, and that lots of work has already been done, and that we know a lot more now than we did before, and we're going to keep learning until we get this whipped. Acknowledge how well they're doing with interacting with the person. Point out when they handled situations well. We also want to preserve a sense of the person with the disease as a whole. It's not just, grandma with Alzheimer's disease. It's grandma who's lived an amazing life, who has lots of pieces to her life, all of which are important and all of which are still there somewhere. She may or may not remember all of them. She may not be able to share all of them. They are all still there. They never disappeared. And so we want to share good stories about the person with the child. Let me tell you about when grandpa did this, or when grandma did this, or let me tell you about your dad when he was your age. We want to make sure that that child always sees the person as a whole, that they have the context of the person. That's so important. And I also think it's valuable to reminisce with the person with the disease when the child is present. Whether it be somebody in early stage, whether it's in middle stage, sometimes even middle and late middle stage, that reminiscence can really trigger beautiful conversations. And there's a lot of security blankets there. So, in other words, when you're having these reminiscent conversations with the child present, they get to see the person, in a way that perhaps rises beyond how they normally present. Calculate ways to promote positive moments. Family makes a DVD of the person's life. These are just suggestions. There's a wonderful program called Time Slips, which you could look up on Google, where you pull out a crazy picture. Some of my favorite pictures are a the fronts of greeting cards. And this is the picture was a woman that's vacuuming a horse pasture. And so you take out this crazy picture and say, what in the world's happening here, and begin creating a story, writing a story based on that picture. And it just gets to be hilarious and projective and all kinds of good things. So, you can learn about the Time Slips program and do that. And it works best with individuals with middle stage and kids, because there's not, in both sectors, there's not the same level of inhibition. And that disinhibition in this case is a positive. You can give what I call mirror gifts. Create a puzzle out of a picture of grandma for the child and a puzzle out of a picture for the child for grandma. Or a picture of dad at age 16 and a picture of the child as they turn 16 in puzzles or in a Christmas ornament or whatever, but something that's shared between the two. Emphasize commonalities, have it come up in conversations, keep pulling those connections with the kids. You both just love strawberry. You guys always get strawberry ice cream and those kind of things. So you're keeping those connections. We share this idea. And if they don't want to visit, as I said, have them make cards, write letters, create art, so that there's still a presence of them and the person living with the disease, still understands that they're important to that child. Balance your family needs. Children need to be involved in regular children's activities. Don't lose sight of that as you're taking care of a parent, grandparent, or someone important to you. Guilt does not serve anyone in the family well. If you're in this sandwich generation and you're trying to manage both ends, you're going to do the best you can. You're going to get help when you can, and you're going to understand you cannot meet all the needs all the time. No family member should be sacrificed for another. Not the child, not the person living with the disease, and not you. If home care demands become great enough, options should be explored. You're not the only person that can do this. There can be other supports included. Attend support groups, nurture yourself. Incorporate opportunities to utilize your experience to help others. And there's lots of ways to do this. Asking kids advice. How can we help other people going through this? And people do it different ways. Sometimes they'll do education programs in their church. Sometimes they'll do a fundraiser for Alzheimer's. Sometimes they'll write letters to people without families in nursing homes. There's all kinds of ways, but anytime we're using what's wrong, our experiences, the negative stuff in our life for the greater good, there's a strong coping associated with that. There's an energy associated with that that's positive and useful. And finally, and I know we're about out of time, but there was a study done. As we think about this is somehow harming kids, there was a study done a few years ago looking at the impact of family caregiving on adolescent relationships. And I want you to really pay attention to some of the results of what happened, because that adolescent had been involved in family caregiving. Increased sibling activity and sharing, so stronger sibling relationships, greater empathy for older adults, significant mother-adolescent bonding, friend selection and maintenance, so they picked better friends and they were able to sustain friendships longer, figured out how to relate to people better, and it provided a model for healthy grieving that translated to other experiences. So, if you pull kids in, if you're honest with kids, if you talk to kids about it, Is it harmful in some way? Is it going to damage relationship in some way? Certainly doesn't need to. And there can be a whole bunch of good things that happen as a result. As always, if there's questions or concerns, or you want to discuss some of what has been said today, do not hesitate to be in dialogue with you. You see email and phone number on the screen. It's on the website as well. Do not hesitate to reach out. I hope for you beautiful conversations with the children in your lives.